Welcome to Paranormal M, where thrilling tales of the unexplained take center stage. Subscribe now and turn notifications for your weekly dose of mystery. Let the haunting begin. Shadow figures and my personal theory. Part 1. The experiences. In my early 20s, I started experiencing sleep paralysis, accompanied by a dark shadow figure. Sometimes it would just stand there, and other times I felt like it was trying to pull my soul out of my body or something. This would happen every now and then until I was in my 30s. And while it freaked me out when it happened, I didn't put much thought into making it stop, nor had I ever described it to anyone. In my mid-30s, I was visiting a friend in Colorado and sleeping in the same room with him. In the morning, he described that he woke up in the middle of the night and swore he saw a shadowy figure crouched on top of me while I was sleeping, and appeared to be eating me. He said he shooed it away by yelling at it and went back to sleep. He thought it was creepy, but assumed it was a weird dream and went about her day. After my spiritual awakening, which I'll describe more in part 2, I figured out how to make this stop. But a couple of more things that happened after that. A dream or so after I figured out how to make it stop, my brother randomly told me about his own experiences with the shadowy figure that haunted him that were similar to my experiences, and even described some of the same figures I saw. I also saw many describe them here. I drew some of them in one of my old journals, which I might go get and post pictures of later. Finally, after I figured out how to make them stop, I had a dream or other dimensional experience where these entities threatened to come after my daughter if I didn't, quote-unquote, let them off their leash, so to speak. I told them to try it and went on with my life. Unfortunately, a couple of years later, when my daughter was about 8, she did start having visual hallucinations, as her therapist described them, though she herself called them monsters or shadow creatures. It became so severe that we had to put her in therapy because she would not be in any room by herself and started having behavioral issues. I think the therapy helped, of course, but in the same way somebody described here, I confronted the shadow figures and told them to back the fuck up off my daughter and come for me if they were going to come for anyone. Eventually, we got this under control as well. However, not long ago, she's 10 now, I was walking by her room and I saw a shadow figure shaped as a deformed cat jumping off of her bed. I asked her later if she still saw them, and she said that she did, but that she was no longer scared of them. The creepiest thing about that conversation is that I never told her I saw the shadow figure. It looked like a cat jumping off of her bed. Didn't want to scare her. But in that same conversation, she told me she had named him Shadow Cat. Part 2. The Resolve. So, my theories on the shadow figures. After I got out of a very abusive relationship, I started doing shadow work as a way to self-heal and growth. This sent me down a spiritual journey rabbit hole. But long story short, I started reading a bunch of Carl Jung, which led me to my other archetypes, meditation, and many other spiritual theories. On a surface level, shadow work is about being able to recognize, accept, and understand the dark traits of your soul. Anger, jealousy, narcissism. How to control them and or accept them as part of you. Through this quote-unquote shadow work, I started being able to summon and confront these shadows or demons through deep meditations. The shadow figures are a part of you. They're the darkest parts of your soul and energy. And when you try to suppress them or ignore their existence, they'll try other ways to get out. And this is often expressed through short tempers, fear, anxiety, self-destructive behaviors. Children, those who are perhaps going through something difficult, which makes you sensitive, Those stuck in the in-between of awake and sleep, and those who just naturally have extrasensory abilities, see these shadows in their physical form. They also feel them physically or feel them consuming the part of them that is light. They want to be the ones in total control. If you confront them in meditations, they'll offer you the world to let them have this control. In everyday situations, it's more simple. Have you ever felt or thought, if I just punched this motherfucker in the face and got revenge, all would be right in the world? The answer for making this conflict stop is balance. You must accept and understand all parts of yourself, even the dark parts of yourself, to keep them from haunting you and trying to consume you. I started calling this putting my shadow on a leash. Like, I'm angry, but I shouldn't feel angry. This is unacceptable behavior to society. I'm angry and I should feel angry. This is the part of my soul telling me I'm being mistreated. With my daughter, through therapy and my own shadow work with her, she's learned not to fear her dark night of the soul. However, I believe she can still see the shadow sometimes because she hasn't learned how to regulate her emotions, fully accept these parts of herself, or integrate them. She's only 10 after all. The shadows knows this as well. Why they still wait to consume her light, and she still sees Shadow Cat, though she does not fear them like she used to. A ghost warning me from a psycho. Hello. So about a week ago, me and my friend went ghost hunting in an abandoned house, or more like a hut, big like 3 family cars. It was located in a forest. It was abandoned from the year 2001 because of newspapers I found in there. We went there at sunset, planning to be there for about an hour, and we got some activity on the EMF detector and on the spirit box. That's where we found out that the past owner's name was Peter. After half an hour in the building, we heard footsteps outside, and the conversation went like this. Me. Is there someone outside? Ghost. Yes, me. Is the person alive? Ghost. Yes, me. Is that person a danger to us? Yes, me. Does the person want to hurt us? Yes, me. Is there a reason why does he want to hurt us? No, me. Is he armed with a dangerous weapon? Yes, me. Should we leave? Yes. So after that, we heard a person outside. He wasn't even talking to us, so me and my friend got out of the building. We were almost an hour in the building by that. Someone shined a bright flashlight on my friend when he'd leave the building. After both of us leaved the building, and or left, went through a hole in the fence that we entered the property with, there was a fat guy, probably 50, with a big dog. He started talking to us and asking what we were doing there and if there was more people. After we told him the truth, he started saying that we should go, and we apologized. But then the guy pulled out a fucking machete and he started threatening us that he will kill us. He literally said how he would stab us with it. We're not even 18, so he was threatening minors that he will stab them even after we apologized like 10 times, and he didn't even know if somebody owned it. He said, I don't know who owns it. As we're backing out, this guy told us to come there the next day and fix the fence that's broken for like 2 years, and I had a broken arm. What? He wanted a person with a broken arm to fix a fence that isn't his. What was the guy even thinking? So, after that we walked away, and of course he never showed up to fix the fence. But the crazy thing about it is that the ghost warned us about the guy getting every detail correct, because he didn't even have a reason to harm us. I think he's just some idiotic psychopath who's enjoying threatening people that are more vulnerable than him. Stabbing with a machete. That's new. Peculiar sleep paralysis apparition. This happened a few days ago. I was staying in Florida for a while with this girl. We were staying at her dad's, and she hated being at her dad's. She hated staying in her room, to the point while she was staying there with me, we'd sleep in a tent in the yard. We had gotten into a fight, and she went to stay with her daughter's father again. I stayed in her room while I saved up the money to go back north. One night I woke up sometime around 2-3 a.m. laying on back on one of the 2 love seats in her room. The room was dark, and on the opposite corner of the room from me was a closet and wardrobe with no door protruding from the wall. It barely had the room for a full person to stand inside it. Not even a minute after, I had opened my eyes and I felt an overwhelming weight on my entire body, and at the same time I had seen a face poke around opening in the closet. It crept out of the closet, and its full form was upper body, and it was an old woman, but the lower body of a baby that was proportionate with the rest of its body. Good comment, Gecko. It slowly made its way around the perimeter, walking almost as a baby and an old lady at the same time. That tracks. It made its way until it was at my feet, looking over at me almost confused, as if I wasn't the person it was expecting. It almost felt as if it was warning me. I shouldn't have been there. Then I turned away and made its way back to the closet. Almost instantaneously as it disappeared back into the closet, the weight on my chest dissipated, and a sense of relief washed over me. But within the same minute, the weight returned as I saw the same face poking back out of the closet. I somehow jarred myself fully awake and sitting before her, and had a chance to lock me back in for another round. Turned on the light, checked the closet. Shortly after this experience, a neighbor informed that she had seen this apparition multiple times herself. She had lives there. She had lives. She had lived there since she was a child. And the girl's 60-plus dad had also moved in there around the same time. Then a conversation with her dad raised my suspicions, or, as they put it, suspension, that he had an attraction to children. Ugh. Funny and then gross. I left very shortly after this, without really much warning to anyone. It wasn't until recently I made the connection between my suspicions and the apparition. Residual energy can manifest as spirits with appearances related to the act that left the energy. Do you guys think that the spirit was the residual energy of heinous acts against children occurring in this house? I've never experienced anything like this before, or anything like it since, and it still bothers me. It makes me feel sick to this day when I think about the apparition. Please help me understand what's going on. Hi, I'm a programmer who likes taking walks. And sometimes on my walks, something very strange happens. I'm not sure if this is even the correct place to post this, but I feel like I've gone through other avenues and like speaking to mental health professionals who told me this is not a mental health related problem. I was wondering if anybody had experienced or knows anybody who experienced something similar, or at least if someone has some explanation about what's happening to me. I'd really like to hear because I feel like I'm losing my mind. The problem. When I'm out on my walks with my dog, occasionally I will hit with what will feel like a distant memory. The odd thing is, the memories of the current place and seemingly the current time period. However, the memory feels ancient, even and possibly old, given I'm only 33 and these memories feel like they're from earlier than that. Not only that, I have no words to describe how high definition that memory is, and how weirdly interactive it is. The only way I can describe it is by comparing our reality to that of a PlayStation 1 game. This reality looks like a badly rendered PlayStation 1 game by comparison. The place in the memory is the same place, but there's so much feeling of belonging, home, and love that resonates strongly from these memories. So what about it? The memories seem to not be tied to an event or a person, but they're tied to places and smells and triggered by places and smells. They come with a deeper sense of home and belonging and love. Love than anything I can usually remember, a stronger sense of familiarity, and overwhelming happiness to quote-unquote be back. Or so the emotions would indicate. In the past, they were just flashes of picture filled with like layers of emotion, and now the memories can last of maybe up to around 10 seconds or so. I can look around and remember things are impossible, but when I leave the immersion, I forget them like a dream. But I remember having remembered them, even if I don't remember them now. Make sense? Doesn't make any sense to me anyway. My thoughts. Well, initially I thought I'm going crazy. Time to talk to a mental health professional. They assured me it doesn't sound mentally health related, it sounded like a strong imagination. I started finding out what else it could be. Since I know for a fact I could not have willingly imagined such a higher definition place because it seems impossible to imagine until you saw it. And so it seems to line up uncomfortably well with simulation theory. But if it's a simulation, then it feels like this reality has bugs or is breaking apart slowly in general. I would personally rather be a mental health problem, or even something paranormal, than breaking down a simulation for obvious reasons. But I do feel like this world feels less and less real to me every time it happens, which happens 2 or 3 times a week, by the way. Always on my walks, and always triggered by a combination of location and smell. There seems to be no reoccurring spot, and I cannot reproduce it purposefully. Please give me your thoughts if you know anything, or if this sounds like something familiar or similar to something. Please tell me what you think it could be, or even ideas how to trigger it to happen again, or to keep me there for longer. That's because these 10 seconds, it's just not enough each time. I just want to feel that sensation of home, belonging, and love again. But I'm unknowing and distrustful of what's even happening. Boyfriend saw and heard me, but I wasn't actually there. So this happened about 4 years ago or so. I was dating a man who was an extreme skeptic when I've always been 100% a believer, even with only one personal paranormal experience before. This is a cool story for another time. He and I had been dating for about 3 years at this point. I've always had a rule about no pranking, scaring, or tricking my partner. I've always been completely honest with him. He had the same values with me. Despite him being a non-believer, to this day he's always said what he experienced in this story was completely unfabricated, and to his dissatisfaction he still has no explanation for this event, even though he's mulled it over far too many times in the past years. Even after we had ended things between us, he still maintains his skeptic status. But if you ask him to logically explain this incident without paranormal activity of some kind involved, all he says is, "I don't know." Now, let me tell you what actually happened. If anybody has had a similar experience, or if they can offer any insight into this, I'd love to hear it. One afternoon, I was getting ready to go out on a date with said boyfriend. I like to do heavy makeup looks for fun when I go out. So, per usual, I'm standing at my mirror on the dresser, creating some eyeshadow look, which notoriously took a bit of time. My boyfriend decided to go outside while I did this. He wanted to clean up the back porch. So, about 15 minutes into me doing my makeup while listening to some songs, played Outlook on my Google Home, but not singing out loud because I didn't want to mess up my makeup. My boyfriend comes barreling in the front door, rushes to where I'm at in my room. He's completely out of breath, looking at me expectantly with teary eyes and as if I'm supposed to know what it is that had him in this state, which for context, he was the least emotional person I've ever dated. I'd only ever seen him cry about 5 times in our whole 4-year relationship. So I'm confused as hell. As if to try to make any more sense to me, he just yells, "What's wrong?" Still looking frantic and out of breath, I of course just say, "What?" He repeats himself again, just looking at me. I asked him what had him acting so uncharacteristically freaked out, but he's acting like I should obviously know. Confusion between us continues until I get him to explain what he's trying to ask me. His version of events in those few moments when he went outside was this. Says that he went to the yard and was moving fallen limbs and things into a pile as I was getting ready. A couple of minutes go by until he's interrupted by me, apparently, standing at our sliding glass door that overlooks the part of the yard he's in. He said that I looked extremely distressed. He could see my face very clearly, and that I looked scared. He then heard me bang on the door to get his attention, and it was as if something was urgent. Then heard my voice yell from inside, "Get in the house! I need you now! Come here, come here!" He doesn't hesitate, figuring something was very wrong or that I might be in danger somehow. Which, when I see him coming inside, I thought he was pranking me. I hadn't moved from where I was at, and the curtain on the sliding glass door was covered still. But like I mentioned before, it was not in our nature to joke like that. He thinks the same thing of me when I said I've been standing in the front of my dresser the entire time. I had him repeat these events, and he did so sounding just as freaked out as he initially did. He said that he saw very clearly me, full body. Distinctly heard my voice, which he said he could never mistake my voice for someone else's, like a neighbor. He said he watched my mouth yell these words to him, and I looked like I was the one freaking out. There's nothing there when he looked for me in the living room next to said door and found me in the room holding a makeup palette in one hand and brush in the other. I wasn't even singing along to the music I had playing. So it's not like he heard my singing and mistook it for whatever just happened. Nothing like that had ever happened between us since. Fast forward a few years to my next boyfriend. I still lived in the same house. I told him this story when we were first getting to know each other, as I've always thought it was interesting. He was a mild believer in the paranormal activity, but didn't have any stories of his own. A few months until us dating after he started coming to my house often, he had his own experience. He was out to his car at night and had just sat down in it. He had been out there a few moments while I was inside watching TV in bed. He comes in a couple of minutes later looking confused and asked me why I'd stepped outside or had called for him, which I did not. Then he tells me that it's weird that I didn't because he heard my voice distinctly, almost in his ear while he was in his car smoking. He said that he heard me say as clear as day, "What is that?" in a sort of upset tone. When he turned around expecting me to see, or rather for expecting me, When he turned around expecting me to see me, there was nothing. He thought about what just happened for a few seconds before getting out of the car and coming directly inside to see if it somehow was really me. What's the saying? Fool me once, fool me what now? The Moose Man. Wendigo. When I was a child, my family would go to my grandmother's house for Thanksgiving. I was one of the youngest of my cousins, of which there's a large group. My grandmother had a secluded home, backed up to expansive woods. Her house was adorned with Native American artwork and artifacts. My cousins and I would go off and explore the woods behind her house together, walking atop old rock walls and playing with the frogs in nearby ponds. The air was sweet and thick back there. The area was historically home to a large Native American population, and there were some interesting features in the woods evidencing that history, including an abandoned sweat lodge covered in animal hides, which I was always too afraid to explore, and old stone arrowheads in the dirt. One Thanksgiving, one of my older cousins and I paired off from a larger group, and we were in back of the woods, seeking to explore further into the woods. We walked about 15 minutes or so through a fairly thick, unfamiliar portion of the woods when we arrived at the top of a large rock outcropping at the edge of a steep embankment. The hair on my arm still stands up thinking about this. And it's right now as I write this that I saw a tall, humanoid figure in ragged clothes at the bottom of the embankment, about 30-40 feet down, facing away from me and my cousin. I was curious, but wary, wondering if the figure were a dummy or maybe somebody that was injured and needed our help. I considered calling out, but saw the figure move slightly, and suddenly I was full of fear. Without making a sound, I tapped my cousin and signaled for him to look down at the figure. We looked back up at each other, and I was hoping for a sense of reassurance, but I could see a dread in his eyes that shot down my spine. When we looked back down at the figure, it turned toward us. This tall, lanky, ragged humanoid figure had the face of a moose. It was looking dead at me. We locked eyes, and I can't explain why, but I knew that it wanted to eat me. We didn't wait. We didn't even scream. My cousin and I ran as fast as we could possibly run, back the same way that we came. As I ran, I could feel that we were being pursued. I was younger and a step slower than my cousin. The air grew thicker and hazier, and the woods changed around us. All of a sudden, my cousin and I come into a clearing in the woods that did not exist when we had passed through originally. The air there was particularly thick, almost green with fireflies floating around. The ground in the clearing was marked with circles of mushrooms, fairy rings. It was very disorienting. Felt like the clearing was luring me to stay forever. All of a sudden, I heard my mom call out to me through the woods. She, along with some of my uncles and aunts, came to look for me and my cousin. We were the last two in the woods, and it was getting darker. It was time to sit for Thanksgiving dinner. Her call pierced through the fog of this experience, breaking whatever curse was on me and my cousin, allowing us to escape. My cousin and I told the others what we had seen, that we had been pursued by the Moose Man. Apparently, he wanted to eat us, but obviously nobody believed us. I probably wouldn't have believed my own senses either, if not for what happened next. After dinner, all of the kids went back outside to play in the yard, running behind sheds and cutting in and out of the woods at the edge of the yard, evading and capturing each other in a game called Manhunt. I used to play that with my grandma. She'd chase me around with a cane and smack me. I was still afraid from before, but took comfort in numbers and proximity to the house. As a large group of us were trying to locate the last of the fugitives, one of my cousins shone a big flashlight into the woods. There, our whole group saw one of our fugitive cousins in a bush, and standing right behind him, a tall, ragged humanoid figure with the head of a moose was towering over the bush. We all screamed, sprinted back inside. That was the end of games that day. Sometimes I bring up this event with my cousins to see if they still remember. They do remember, but they hate to talk about it. Demon Face Syndrome. I'm not sure if this is the right place to post, so I've heard rumblings about the demon face syndrome that's been happening. I thought it was a bunch of creepypasta crap, but I just had the weirdest moment about 5 minutes ago, and I'm a little bit nervous I'm losing my mind or something. I was just on Instagram scrolling mindlessly before bed, and I stopped on this video. It was some girl talking about top 5 hydrating foods or something. I got bad vibes from her. There's no bad hydration. It was like she was getting paid to promote some random product. Well, yeah. That's why I'm not on there. But as I kept watching her face, started to distort into this really weird version of itself. Her eyes got really big and her mouth got wide. Started happening, so I subtly couldn't figure out if it was actually me seeing it or not, but eventually I was like, nope, she definitely looks different now, and really disturbing. I checked the comments to see if anybody said anything. My guess was she was using a filter, and maybe it was supposed to be a joke or something somebody made to be creepy, like Uncanny Valley horror stuff. But not one person said anything about it in the comment section. I scrolled through about 100 comments before giving up. I figured I should look at someone else's face to see if it was happening with everyone or just with her. If it was with everyone, I would assume I was having a mental breakdown, but no one else looked that way, just her. It was really scary, and I'm not sure if this was the demon face phenomenon everyone's been talking about. I've heard spiritual people on social media talk about certain individuals having the ability to see non-human beings. But again, I thought it was just bull and really didn't put much stock into it. There's so much random stuff online now. I don't believe 98% of what I see. The rational part of me says that it was a codec error and you saw like a ghosting drag of probably this lady's mouth yapping away trying to sell her thing. The other part of me thinks she's a lizard person. Why not? shadow figure in abandoned prison. To give context, from a small town in Georgia named Milledgeville, or Milledgeville. And one of two things: you either don't know the town or you do. If you've heard of the town, it's probably because Ben Roethlisberger, or because of Central State Hospital, also known as Georgia State Sanitarium or Milledgeville State Hospital. Milledgeville. By the 1960s, Central State was known as the largest mental hospital in the world, with some 200-plus buildings on the campus. You could almost equate it to a military base where it was basically self-efficient. Had its own post office, kitchens, nursing homes, several prisons, police, and fire departments. The campus had pretty much been closed since 2010, with just a few of the buildings being operated by a Department of Corrections training division, the Probation and Parole Office, which was closed as of 2024. One night there was a fire in one of the prisons, the abandoned men's state prison, which had been since reportedly happened in 2011. Being a volunteer firefighter at the time and not knowing when I would have another chance to legally be inside one of the prisons, I responded. I was part of one of the first crews to make an initial fire attack on their fire room. It's been since 2019, and the layout of where we made entry is a little bit fuzzy, but bear with me. We made entry through a maintenance room, made a left into a long corridor, went approximately 30-40 feet down the hallway, which then opened up into another corridor, both left and right, with the rooms on both sides of this hallway. Visibility was limited due to the fire, smoke, and it was about midnight. We found the fire room and was able to extinguish most of the fire before having to swap out with another crew because we were running low on air. Using flashlights, we were able to see down the hallway that opened up both ways. Nothing peculiar or out of the normal was there. Even without flashlights, could kind of make some things out. After the second crew came out, another firefighter and myself went in for another time as a mop-up crew. Since in the two attacks we made, we had pretty much put the fire out. Him and I followed the hose line and not thinking, I didn't grab a flashlight, however my partner did. So I followed him. Still inside the fire room was one of our investigators, a full-timer, a rookie who went through the same class as me, and of course myself. Since the guy I went in with on his second pass didn't get to quote-unquote play, as we called it, I let him be the nozzle man. I fed him hose from the hallway that opened up to the left and right. It was him and the other two firefighters that I mentioned above in the actual fire room. And this is where it gets creepy. As I was feeding perhaps, the guy's hose, I look right down the hallway, probably about 60, 70 feet, possibly more. I'm not great with distance at times. I saw a shadow fitting there. The figure was about 7-8 feet tall, skinny, red eyes. How I could tell it was a shadow figure was yes, I didn't have a flashlight, and yes, it was dark looking down the hallway, but this figure was darker than anything around it. It wasn't the people that set the stuff in the prison on fire, because they were the idiots that showed up to the station in person and reported the fire. Nothing electrical in the prison was on and operational because it had been closed since 2011, like I said. So, nothing red would have been on. I probably looked at it with what seemed like to be forever. Well, it was probably only a minute to a minute and a half before the nozzle man said to back out. I looked at him, acknowledged that I heard him, repeated back out, and before I knew it, I looked down the hallway and the figure was gone. Of Of course, being the only one in the hallway at the time, and the only one that saw this figure. After this happened, I kept it to myself. I didn't want somebody to think I was crazy or make excuses as to what I saw. One day, I was visiting with one of my friends at the Outlier station several months later. I was just having casual conversations. She had been stationed at the fire station in that district and had just been talking. I don't know what made me bring it up to her, but I asked her if she had any experiences of anything out of the normal out there. Of course, she says, well, it's Central State. If you really haven't been out there. I went into what happened that night. When I start to mention about maybe seeing a shadow figure, she interrupts me and begins to describe it to a T. 7-8 feet, skinny, glowing red eyes. I almost froze cold. Here's the interesting thing, though. I saw this figure in an abandoned prison after midnight. She saw the same exact figure in another building. Come to find out, on the opposite end of the campus in broad daylight while she was doing pre-fire plans. I try not to think about it. It's hard to forget seeing the experience like something like that. So I guess moral of the story is, if you go to the buildings on Central State grounds, which I don't recommend due to the deteriorating conditions of the building and asbestos, and you'll get arrested for trespassing, just know there might be a shadowy figure waiting to make his presence known to you. But I'd also like to know what y'all think this spirit figure entity, whatever you'd like to call it, could be. Especially since it doesn't just linger in one specific building, it seems like. I worked in a haunted bar. Featured on Ghost Adventures. If anybody watches Ghost Adventures, you can look up the episode called The Chinatown Poltergeist, and it's an episode inside the bar I worked at for half a year. On my first day to interview, the general manager and the bar manager were very clear with me that the bar was haunted. They're very serious and that it's more mischievous than it is dangerous. Having had my own paranormal experiences in college and having somewhat of a higher vibration, you could say, I wasn't really too worried about it, and I really wanted and needed the job. Vinnie Paul Abbott of Pantera was actually there the night before he died. Fun fact. A lot of my coworkers had different stories, along with the stories that are featured in the Ghost Adventures episode. Entities mentioned were an old man and a little girl. Really something with little girls in haunted places. Having things break or go missing. Voices in storage areas. Voices when the bar was empty during grave hours. It's a 24-hour bar. And even physical things like hair being pulled or one guy being thrown to the ground after mocking an artifact of a shrunken head that may or may not be a real shrunken head. I was also shown a ceremonial blade and it still has real human blood on it, and an urn that apparently had a fraction of the ashes of Aleister Crowley. For a while, I never saw or heard anything. I was left by myself alone in the bar a few times. I did put music on and just kind of sing like maybe there's spirits here and I'll give them a show. But I started to change. I was always angry and frustrated. I would rationalize all these things I should be happy and grateful for, but I just couldn't help it. I was always pissed. And on a 120-degree day in Vegas, when a belligerent customer started harassing me, I told her to shut the fuck up. And as liberating as that was, because she was an evil person, it was out of my character for a professional bartender of 13 years. Then I started getting these weird rashes and marks that are apparently called, not my dog flopping his ears, but these marks that are apparently called dermatographia. thought I was getting really sick and got it in my head I'd developed something really bad. And that led to more stress, lots of restless days, and eventually my herniated disc started acting up randomly and got to such a level of pain that I was having a scoop of ice while on my knee. The pain in my back affected my performance so much that I lost the job. And from there, I spiraled into 3 or 4 months of panic attacks and levels of anxiety I never thought I was capable of experiencing. As a spiritual person that's still sort of learning about God, I called on that and I prayed for my strength. Eventually, I was able to push through, avoid medication, and work my way out of the depression. But I just haven't been able to shake the effect that place had on me. And I was warned. Never seen such a high turnover. There's very few of the staff that had stuck around for various reasons. One of the last messages from my bar manager was wishing me good luck on an admission and how weird the energies were there. Could have just been some coincidental nervous breakdown, but intuitively, I don't think so. I don't feel safe in my home anymore. For a while now, I've been seeing things around my house. It started off with small things like doors being nudged open without windows open or the AC on. The first big thing was seeing a shadowy figure in my parents' room. It wasn't doing much, just peeking around the corner watching me. I wasn't sure if it was real or not, but my cat reacted to it as well. Recently, it had started to progress further by being what sounds like running up the stairs while everyone's asleep. I had questioned my mom about where my cat was the night it happened. Majority of the time, he's with her. Other times, he's downstairs. The confusing part is that he's old. He doesn't run like that anymore. Other experiences that really seem to further show that there was energy that was above my sink, and there's a window. It's like a view to the fence along my house. But we have junk back there. One night, my dad picks me up from work, and I'm eating a late dinner. I hear what sounds like something trying to open the window, so the seal creaks a little. I heard it, turned, and saw a faceless creature, thing that was supposedly looking at me, duck away and hide. I run upstairs to get my dad, and we both run outside looking for whatever it was. The most confusing part is that it would have to make noise to escape. This thing vanished. No trace, no sound. He's a man of logic and reason, so he comes up with it being a reflection. It would have to be the weirdest reflection to not be moving as I turn my head, only to duck away a second after seeing it. But then on, I would see a figure in the bathroom downstairs. It would just stand there in the corner of my eye, but vanish when I would look at it. I was skeptical, wondering if it was a trick of the light, but as a last look, I looked over expecting to see the figure, but instead I see an arm poking out of the doorway. I froze as it again, like the face, retreat a second later. My cat was downstairs, staring at the doorway as confused as I was. I sat down sitting next to him, staring at the doorway, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did until I went upstairs. I had some clothes out, getting ready to put them away, when I heard what sounded like the whimper of a little girl. I wondered if it was me. I tried replicating the sound, but it wasn't happening. I've been beyond confused, wondering if it's my imagination or not, especially considering the fact that my cat has reacted to these experiences. I don't know what's going on or why anymore. Strange visual patterns. Some nights ago, I had a strange experience that I can't quite explain. In that evening, I discussed UFOs and plasmoids with my friends on Discord. mentioning the existence of official documents released by trusted sources like the Pentagon, the military, and various universities. With conviction, I said, I want to see them. I was so excited. I woke up in the middle of the night around 5 a.m. I sleep in complete darkness, by the way. Whether my eyes were open or closed, I began to see a pattern of thin gray lines and dots covering my entire field of vision. These lines were arranged in a repetitive, harmonious way, creating ripples that seemed to form meaningful geometric shapes. The shapes were numerous, small, and they were constantly changing like a flow. I was scared. I thought there was a connection with what I said before, or maybe some entity was trying to do something to me. Whenever I looked at a light source, such as my phone screen or some device LED, the patterns would disappear in those areas as if they were overridden or erased by the light. I was fully awake, got out of bed, and walked around for a bit. After returning to bed and closing my eyes, the experience repeated itself, lasting about 5 to 10 minutes. I tried to look at the sky, but there was nothing waiting for me. Throughout this time, I felt a strange light pressure at the back of my head, possibly around the cerebellum, or sometimes even the front of my head when lying straight. Since that day, the same thing has happened again 6 more times. I'm continuing to keep track of the day and time of the visions, always at night. Every single time, I'm looking at new UFO news during the day. Breathing and meditating makes them go away, though. Once instead, I saw the visions after looking at some ancient cave painting image on my smartphone, resembling some alien figures in a spaceship. They only lasted a few seconds, though. It was 2 a.m. and I was chilling on the bed. Was it just a strong suggestion, and did I have a sudden brain ill? I'm curious if anybody else has experienced something similar, or has any ideas about what could be causing it. I'm open to both scientific and speculative explanations. Was I being haunted by an entity? Hey everyone, I moved into my aunt and uncle's house for the summer last year. I had some strange events happen over the course of my stay. To give some background, the previous owner died in the basement by suicide. I don't like talking about this or even thinking about it, as I don't like to give energy to paranormal events that impact me. I don't want to give them power. The first paranormal-ish event I can recall is probably a voice recording I made singing something, and I was playing it back, and there was an interruption in the audio with almost a buzzing type of audio cut. Don't know how to explain it. The audio cut happened when I coincidentally heard a knock or tap on my room door. The second event wasn't really an event, but more of a situation where I felt like I was being watched in the window of my bathroom. Like I felt like I was doing my hair or getting ready, specifically at night. There were eyes on me, watching me through my window. Third is me hearing a voice of men or one man having a conversation in the house when my 2 younger cousins were out of the house, and the only person in the house was my uncle, who had a thick African accent. The voices sounded very American. Fourth is when I couldn't sleep at night and I decided to hang out in the TV room. And at the corner of my eye, I could see something moving, like it was flapping its hands around, and every time I looked in its direction, it disappeared. My cousin's labradoodle looked in its direction too, and what really scared me was hearing the motion sensors go off when everyone was asleep upstairs. The last event that kind of worried me was hearing a tap or gentle knock or push on the door, and my dog staring at the direction of the sound and then barking at that direction. I've heard dogs are really sensitive to paranormal stuff, so this deaths worried me. This happened the night of when I told my friend on the phone that I felt like there was a ghost. Am I just being weird about everything and making something out of nothing, or does this sound like paranormal activity? Deaths. I lost my best friend 25 years ago. I recall it like it was yesterday. It was the Super Bowl Sunday, January 30th, 2000. All was good until started having chest pains, difficulty breathing, and a feeling I was going to die. My mom had cancer at the time, and I was living with her to help her out. She and her best friend, Candy, rushed me to Carson Tahoe ER. In my 4-hour visit, doctors ran test after test and could find nothing wrong. My girlfriend, Debbie, was watching the game at Glenn's Eagles Bar restaurant. Couldn't be bothered or pulled from the game. Ugh. Debbie. I go meet up with all of her friends, and I could not shake the feeling of doom. I remember Debbie was celebrating a Titans victory and winning the football pool when the Rams scored late and snatched victory from their grasp. I wanted to home after the game and just chill. I almost was normal the next day, but something was still amiss. I was at work early at 8 o'clock when I saw my best friend John's younger brother David at the door. He came in and said, "I need to tell you something about John. He passed away yesterday." This occurred at the same time I was in the hospital. He had his PhD, and he was on his way home from Africa when his plane crashed 1 minute after takeoff. He'd spent 2 years serving in the Peace Corps and returned to serve. He met his wife in the Peace Corps. It's a small world as she went to Lawrence University and student taught at my high school, Appleton East, in my old hometown, Appleton, Wisconsin. I told the following story at John's memorial. I won a music trivia contest and won a trip to Hawaii. I took John when the girl I had a crush on, Jody, ghosted me a week before the trip. John and I spent my 23rd birthday in Waikiki, sitting on our hotel balcony listening to Kenny Loggins' concert. I was a DJ, sent tons of mixtape to John about every other week. I also sent Springsteen's 4-cassette box live, 1975 to 1985. That was something I sent to him for Christmas. He loved the Boss, and especially the Eagles. He also bought fifths of tequila and vodka, shipped it to him about once a month, shampoo bottles to get through customs. He was very popular at the Peace Corps functions. He played his guitar daily in the 4 years we lived together, and I still tear up any time I hear a song by the Eagles. Rest in peace, John. Still think about you every day, 25 years later. Sickly, creepy 2-story house. So, I, female, and 28, have a big family. Mom, Dad, they're separated when I was 3 or 4. 4 brothers and 2 sisters. My mother and us kids moved into a small 2-story house on the outskirts of Melbourne City, Australia. That's in or around 2015. Obviously, Melbourne is absolutely massive and incredibly popular. Wouldn't be expected to having these unexplainable activities. At least we didn't expect that this house would. Well, at first, nothing was weird. We moved in and went about life as usual. A number of things started happening over the period of years. When I was 19, I guess, maybe a year after moving into that property, things started to happen. A layout of the house. If you walk in through the front door, the lounge is the first thing you walk into. Next to it is the kitchen. Off to the side is a small hall with the door to the back part of the house on the left and the stairs leading to the second floor on the right. There's only 3 bedrooms, a toilet, and a separate bathroom at the top floor. My mother's room, the middle one upstairs, and my younger brother's room, which was closest to the top of the stairs. They're the only rooms you can get a clear view of the bathroom and toilet doors. This is relevant later. So, the first thing that happened was minor. I was just walking up the stairs to my older brother's room just to hang out. Exactly halfway up the stairs, I heard, "Hey," kind of a whispery, low, quiet man's voice. Nailed it. It didn't resemble anyone in the house. I stopped for a minute and shrugged it off, thinking I imagined it. A week later, it happened again. Halfway up the stairs, I heard a cough and a giggle in the same whispery, low tone. Again, not resembling anyone in the house. I was alone in that exact part of the house both times. I've only memorized some of the instances. The next one was about 3 years later. My sister was around 8 or 9 years old at the time, and she was in my mother's room alone at the time. It was about 11 p.m. Everyone was doing their own thing until we heard my sister scream bloody murder. My mother ran upstairs to check on her. My sister was crying, staring outside of my mother's room at the bathroom door. My mother asked her what's wrong, asking if she's okay. A shadow-looking man was over there just staring at me. He had red eyes. Now, my mother and I are strong believers of the paranormal for many reasons, but that's another story. So, my mother stayed with her for the rest of the night. The same year, I randomly got insanely sick out of nowhere. The last place I was before getting sick was the bathroom. I was incredibly fatigued, pale, and vomiting blood. I slept for 3 days straight, only waking to vomit blood. It took 3 days before anybody noticed something was wrong with me. My mother saw me coming out of her room to go to the bathroom, and she said, "Oh, you're finally deciding to get up." I didn't even notice that she said anything at the time. I headed to the bathroom, dazed, fatigued, and completely zoned out. My mother was apparently watching me waddle in there, lean over the sink, and completely drench it in blood. That's the first time anyone witnessed it within 3 days. I think she was in shock at first. I vaguely remember her saying, "What's that? Is that blood?" In a droopy, weak, half-asleep motion, I slowly turned my head to look at her, blood dripping from my mouth, and slowly nodded. She took me to the ER instantly. I was told I had a blood infection with incredibly high infection markers with an unknown cause and was close to just dropping dead. That scared the shit out of me. I also forgot to mention, whenever I go into that bathroom, even to this day, I moved out but my family still live there, I feel a really dark, negative vibe. I always instantly get a heavy feeling of fatigue, depression, and fear. My mother and sister admitted to feeling the same, but only in that bathroom. There's so many other stories about that house, and I just can't explain, but I think that gives an idea on how creepy and strange that house is. Unfortunately, I still go there somewhat often so I can visit my family because I'm very close with them. But I can't seem to ever shake that bad, scary feeling in that bathroom in the middle of the staircase, or just within the house in general. My father is in hospice. Something strange is going on in the house. My father is in end-of-life care. They estimate he has 2 to 6 weeks left. He's at home with nurses coming by the house. I flew home last weekend as I live far away. When we first moved into this house, my mom and I were watching a movie, and we heard the side door open and somebody walk down the basement where my brother's room is. We figured it was him. We called out his name and no answer. Went down, no one was home. My brother later said he was working all day. Since then, we hear strange noises in the house, but I've since moved away. Since I've been home, we've been hearing strange noises and strange things are happening. Seems to be happening more frequently each day. That only happens on the main floor or basement, not upstairs. Here's a few examples. The living room light turns itself off and on randomly. The power went off and on 5 times one night. No power outages reported online. I sleep on the main floor and I keep hearing banging that sounded almost like someone poking the ceiling with a broom maybe 2 or 3 times a minute. I couldn't place where it was coming from. I kept opening my door to see if I could hear where it was coming from, and it would stop, and my mom didn't hear it. My dad took over my room in the main floor because he can't make up the stairs anymore. He told us that he heard loud knocking on his door 2 times during the night, only to get up, and by the way, it's hard for him to get up, and have no one being at the door. Today, I placed a bottle of wine in the fridge. It was angled with the label facing sideways. As I shut the fridge, I saw the bottle spin itself so that the logo was facing frontwards. I have a dog, and his ball is lying by the TV, and it's winter and all windows are closed. We're watching a movie and no one's moving. The ball quickly rolls toward the couch my mom and me were on. Twice now we've lit candles, and when we go blow them out, there's a dead fly in it. Again, it's winter, and we haven't seen any flies around recently. I don't know what's going on or if it's all in our heads, but I've been here for 6 days with something happening every day. In the last 2 days, almost 2 or 3 times a day. Do I sage the house? Is it related to my father being gravely ill? Is there anything I can do? I think I saw a ghost at my grandparents' house. I recently went to a family reunion at my grandparents' house on my dad's side. At one point, I went down to the first floor and my aunt told me to come upstairs because all my cousins were playing blackjack there. I went up the stairs and I saw them playing. Then I noticed a very skinny girl, same height as me, wearing a white winter jacket, black pants, and white socks. She was watching the boys play cards. She had really heavy makeup, thick eyeliner, dark eyeshadow. I don't have a habit of staring at people's faces for too long, but at first I thought she was my cousin, my uncle's daughter, but wasn't really sure because of the makeup. She even stepped back slightly to make way for me. I didn't think much of it at the time. But later when I got home, I realized that cousin never showed up for lunch. I asked my mom and the other cousins, and they all said the same thing, only my uncle came to the reunion, and his wife and daughter stayed home. None of my cousins saw the girl, and I didn't say a word. Now that I think about it, she disappeared right after I walked past her. And the weirdest part, when I walked up the stairs, she smiled a little and even raised her eyebrows like she was surprised to see me. It was 10:45 a.m., broad daylight. I was completely sober. No alcohol, no drugs, nothing. So, did I just see a ghost? Haunted vintage watch. Please tell me what to do. I wanted to share something that's been kind of haunting and oddly protecting me ever since I bought a vintage Ricoh R61 automatic watch from a quaint antique shop near JJ Hospital in Mumbai, India. I've always been fascinated by old mechanical watches and their history, but I never expected to encounter something like this. I picked up the watch from a seller who restores vintage timepieces from bulk lots. The Ricoh R61 immediately caught my eye. It had a square case, a day-date complication, and a worn but timeless charm. I didn't think much of its history then, though the seller mentioned the watches he acquires often come from estates, or as he vaguely put it, from lives now past. The first night I wore it to bed, I had the most vivid dream of my life. I was in what looked like a smoky disco in the late 70s or early 80s, like mirrored ceilings, strobe lights, polyester suits. Among the crowd, I saw a man in a white polyester suit with a deep maroon shirt and a collar spread wide. He exuded charisma, but carried an air of danger. Suddenly, chaos erupted. Gunshots rang out, and I saw him clutch his chest and fall to the ground, blood pooling around him. A mass shootout. Sterling SMG here and there, AK-47 burpings. I woke up in a cold sweat. Thought it was just a weird coincidence, but the dream repeated almost every night I wore the watch to bed. Each time I saw the same man, and I realized I was somehow viewing his final moments. What's strange is that despite the haunting imagery, the watch seemed to have brought me good fortune. A week after I got it, I narrowly avoided a serious accident. I was crossing the road, and something told me to step back just as a speeding car jumped the signal. Another time, I aced a crucial test I thought I'd bomb. There's been a series of small but significant events that's ever since owning this watch. It worked out in my favor. I began to suspect the man I see in my dreams isn't just anyone. He's the original owner of the watch, and somehow he's acting as a guardian soul. I did some digging into Mumbai's history and learning that the disco era in that city was often tied to organized crime. Gangsters frequented such place, and shootouts weren't unheard of. After researching and identified the year of the make, it was 1972. Only one major shootout at a disco hall in Bombay took place where the gangster died. Here's where it gets weirder. Sometimes, when I'm wearing a watch, I feel a cold sensation on my wrist. Even like, well, as he said, even on Swelter 3J. I've in nights while I study late night occasionally heard faint whispers, especially when I'm in a quiet room. Never clear words, just a murmuring, and the watch has a peculiar way of catching my attention, almost like it wants me to wear it on certain days. Has anyone else experienced something similar with an antique item? I'd love to hear your thoughts on what might be happening or how I can connect more of this spirit without inviting any negative energy.